couple of years ago, YouTuber David Carroll made the video No Hope, No Change for the Negro. I would have to say, in my video today, I'm going to have to agree with him that there is no hope and no change for this Negro. And because in 2008, a lot of people talked about, Barack Obama was going to bring change to the Negro. But I can tell you from personal experience, the Negro does not want to change, and there is no hope of making him change because he does not want to change. The truth about this Negro is he is codependent on white supremacy. He needs the crutch of racism and white supremacy in order to function. And the reason why he needs that crutch is because he likes being the victim. For the Negro, the victim position is a position of power, as he believes. Now, in real life, we all know that the victim is a position of powerlessness. But the Negro himself believes that being a victim is a position of power because this is how your Negro gets his needs met. He goes around playing this shuck and jive, blame and shame game with everyone where he runs around with his hat in his hand talking about how people have discriminated against him, how and there are true cases of discrimination. I don't get it twisted. But this is what his game is. He goes around playing I am a victim of racism and white supremacy. I'm being discriminated against. Everybody just give me some crumbs. He never wants to take action for himself. Because the reason why he doesn't want to take action for himself is one, he doesn't want to acknowledge his problems. Two, he doesn't want to take responsibility for his problems. Three, he doesn't want to take constructive action for his problems. And because when you want to deal with a problem, when you want a solution, you acknowledge the problem so that you can change your situation. And this is something many Negroes just don't want to do. They don't want to go out here and make the efforts to change because they like being the victim. They enjoy that victim position. The victim position for them, again, a position of power, as they believe, because they don't know how any other way of getting their needs met. And when you look at him, he says he wants change because he thought, oh, Barack Obama was going to bring change to the Negro. The truth of the matter is, Barack Obama was not supposed to bring change to the Negro. The Negro had, 40 plus years to bring change to his own community. He had 40 plus years, to plan. All of this is stuff he could have done himself. You don't need a black president to build a black community. And this is something the Negro, he just can't understand because he has no critical thinking skills and he has no vision for the future. He has no way of planning or organizing anything for his future. His idea, because he's a codependent person, this is what codependent people do. They run you around in circles with their excuses, with their arguing, but they don't want to make change. And what usually has to happen to a codependent person, like your Negro on the street, is that they have to hit rock bottom for them to make those changes. And the only thing that's keeping them from hitting that rock bottom and making those changes is this white liberal, as Mr. Carroll pointed out. See, the white liberal and his government programs enable the Negro to continue to maintain in this codependent situation where he continues to play the victim. And because in a codependent situation, it's like this: you have your victim and your enabler, and the whole thing is that the enabler continues to carry the victim, from place to place, because this is how what they do is they call themselves caretaking them and fixing them and continuing to carry this person, you know, because they think that they're going to eventually fix them and make them better. And usually in the codependent situation, everything just continues to deteriorate and get worse and worse over time because usually you reach a point where there's no amount of fixing or caretaking this person before they become beyond repair. They become what we call in the military FUBAR. And what we have with this Negro is that he has reached the point where he's become completely FUBAR. And a lot of them, they're irreparably damaged. Their minds are irreparably damaged because this liberal has carried them for so long. Because this is what happens is in the codependent situation is that the liberal is the one caretaking this Negro and he's making money off of this Negro through his government programs, his nonprofits, and other business ventures. He and a cabal of foreigners, your Negro pastors, black civic organizations, they make their money off of this Negro. And they have no incentive of making things change for the Negro because Negro is a cash cow for them. This is how these people make money. And this is, again, this relates to that codependency issue. Keeping this Negro dependent on them, they are carrying his load because they are getting something from him. And they don't want the Negro to change and form an interdependent relationship where he takes responsibility for himself because they're not going to be able to make money off of him. They're going to remain in the victim position. They want him to remain in that's what I really want to say. They want him to remain in the victim position because they can easily get $3.3 trillion in cash and credit from this Negro. This is spending power. Again, the economic power that the Negro could use to build his own community. He doesn't do that because, again, he's used to getting his needs met through other people. This is why nothing has the hope of changing. Because, again, if you want change, change is hard. Change means you have to come out of what you knew into something different and into the unknown. And when in the unknown, there are a lot of variables that you cannot predict when you're dealing with change. Because I know from personal experience, I had to deal with change, and it's a very, very painful and hard process. And many of these Negroes don't want to go through that pain. Many of these white liberals don't want to go through that pain. Many of these foreigners don't want to go through that pain because if there was true change, it would be a total socioeconomic upheaval in the black community. And again, many of these people who are used to making money off of the Negro's victimization, exploiting his victim mode position, and they would not be able to make money like your Negro pastors. They would not be able to make money if things changed for the Negro. Your black nonprofits and civic organizations, they would not be able to make money off the Negro in the grant program, grant writing and grants they get. These grants and donations they get. Excuse me. From talking about how poor and miserable this Negro is. Because if he's moving up and building his own middle class, we don't need grant makers don't need to give as much money as they used to these programs. Because if you have a stronger middle class and these people and black people are becoming more interdependent, you don't need to give them as much money. You don't need to have much. You can take that. The grant makers would have to take that money elsewhere. So that program would not get as much money. All these programs would not get as much money. And even in Washington, the thing is that Also, let me go into for something further. These landlords and stuff with the Section 8 housing. Again, if this Negro is be able to pay his own rent, these people with these government block grants, Section 8, your welfare, your WIC, they're not going to be able to get money off this Negro. These foreign-owned stores won't be able to make money. They won't even be able to come into the community. The foreigners will be forced to build their own community because you would have black-owned businesses in the community. And all of this is, again, if this is what happens when a person changes from a codependent to an interdependent. And a lot of people don't want the Negro to become interdependent. They don't want him to start, being able to take responsibility for himself. This is why they don't want change. A lot of people, they talk change. What I'm finding with the Negro community is a lot of people talk change, but they really aren't about change. They dance around it. They really don't want to make the hard efforts, roll up their sleeves, start doing that heavy lifting, start carrying that load, because a lot of them are really scared that if they have to go into this unknown, that they may not survive it. But the truth of the matter is you will survive it and you will adapt to it. But a lot of them are just too scared to make that first step. This is why they continue to remain, stranded in this poverty situation. And this is why they're really, again, no hope, no change, because they're too afraid to take those baby steps forward. Because I had to make those baby steps about 22, 23 years ago. And it's a hard struggle still, but I don't mind doing that, and I don't mind continuing to push because I see myself, moving forward and making progress. But with this Negro, he's too scared, to make those efforts. Um, Again, he has not hit rock bottom position. When you hit the rock bottom position, you know, you are forced to take that action, like the alcoholic usually is, or the battered wife. You just reach a point of no return where you go, there is no way for you to come back. The only thing coming back is death. So you have no choice but to move forward. And Negro doesn't want to do this. Again, he's just too scared to take action. All of this is the stuff that he could have easily fixed 40 years ago if he just, rolled up his sleeves and, got to work. But the only thing that's keeping him from going to work is this liberal enabler who continues to make excuses for him, and these Negro pastors. And this is a cabal of people. They live there to make excuses for him. And this is why he doesn't want to change. Um, and when I look at this Negro, I look at him. He has all the possibility to take his community and turn it into, one of the greatest places to live. I mean, but he lets others do it because he's, again, too scared to take action, and he's too scared to take responsibility. Because the whole thing, when you have to take responsibility for something, is you're accountable for it, and a Negro does not like being accountable. He doesn't like accountability because, if I have to be responsible for something, that means I have to go to work. That means I have to be diligent. That means I have to be conscientious. He doesn't want to do those things. As long as he's got this liberal that say, that's not your fault, or I'll take care of it, he feels that he can just lay back and relax. Because as long as the liberal's responsible for him, he doesn't have to take responsibility. And this is a big problem. This is why your Negro community has not grown in 30 to 35 years, because he does not want to make that effort. He does not want to, pick himself up and just get up. He doesn't want to get up off his behind and go out here, roll up these sleeves of his shirt, and just get to work taking care of his community. This is something Negro don't want to do, because building is a hard process and changing is a hard process. And when I heard Barack Obama talking about hope and change, I listened to that. I said, this is a gimmick. This is back in 2008, because they were talking. I was working at this library, at this college, and everybody and all these Negroes are sitting there talking about Barack Obama, and I'm sitting there going, Barack Obama's job is not to change. This hope and change is just a gimmick. It's just a slogan. It has no real value, and it serves nothing more than a feel good, pat on the back. Because as a person, I'm gonna tell you my story in about a minute about change. Change, as I said before, is a hard thing. It is the hardest thing you could ever do in your life. If you want to change your life, you're gonna have to go through something. And this Negro, he's just not equipped to go through change. The way I look at it now, because this liberal has enabled him, he continues to make excuses for him, and this is why he doesn't want to change. He has no incentive to change, and this is why everything just goes around and comes around in this vicious cycle, because he has no incentive to change. You have to hit what they call the rock bottom in order to change. And I'm going to just tell you my story about how I was forced to change my life. Now, I was in high school, back in the late 1980s, and I was just dealing, because I had to deal with this Negro on a regular basis. I had to deal with his dysfunction on a regular basis. And I was in this high school, Park West High School, um, back in the late 80s. And I was looking at my life. I was going nowhere, you know. I really wanted to get the good grades. I really wanted to get, and win the awards, because I had family members. They were these achievers and they did very well, and I wanted to, win those awards and stuff. But the problem was I kept running into these Negroes, and they just kept causing me trouble. And it was hard to study. It was hard to do work, because you get this Negro. He comes to you. You know, he's just all he thinks about is sex and social currency. These are the two things the Negro thinks about. He thinks about, chasing these females, and the social currency, which are these Air Jordan tennis shoes, gold chains, at the time Sony Walkmans, troop leather jackets, anything that will get him, some sort of attention or accolades or praise. This is what the Negro, thinks about all the time. And if you are not, if you're just trying to just go to school and do work, this Negro will just get in your way. He will just, he just is a nightmare to deal with. He's an emotional drama queen. All he thinks about is gossip, and because he would always come to me. These Negroes would always just come to me talking about, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Are you having sex? This, that, the third. You're not wearing the right shoes. You're not wearing. I mean, when I think about this Negro and my experience in high school, Park West High School, he acts just like a female. I mean, females only think about shoes and social currency. They only think about sex all the time. They're only thinking about who's sleeping with whom, who's dating whom. When you think about these rationales, this is the way a female thinks. And it wasn't until I watched Mr. Carroll's video that I started to understand. I started watching other people's videos, like your T-Mods and your Avenue Rants back in the day, that I started understanding. He does think like a female, because only a female thinks about these things. And these are the only things that have value to them. Things like, are you dating a light-skinned woman or a dark-skinned woman? You need a girl. It's like and I remember reading an Archie Digest, at the time, and it didn't resonate to me because I was a teenager back then. I was reading it about a year ago, where Betty and Veronica said to themselves, new girl's coming in town. We need to hook her up with a boyfriend. And this is the way these Negroes were with me. You need a girl. You need a girl. It's like, I want to hook you up. And I sat there, I thought about that Betty and Veronica Digest as I reflected on my own past. And I said, these Negroes think like females. This is feminine behavior. I mean, men like myself, we want to make the grades, we want to do the work, and having to deal with this Negro all the time, it just made me so anxious that it was hard for me to function. And I had to pray to God, to change my life, because I had gotten tired of this Negro. I got tired of his dysfunction. If you're not, and the whole thing is, if you're not with the Negro's set program, if we're not with his dysfunctional program, what he's going to do is he's going to try to use his shaming tactics. He'll talk about how gay you are, how you, in my case, sometimes they would talk about how retarded you are, how there's something wrong with you. And I'm a heterosexual black man, and they're coming to me with this was always their perfect shaming tactic, the gay thing. Always, you must be gay because you don't talk to women, you're not involved. Maybe I'm just trying to get my work done because I don't want to deal with these females. No, because I see them with this dope dealer, and I don't want to get involved with his, dysfunction. And I remember, in the 10th grade, I wound up trying to accommodate people. And then I realized, when I turned 16, I realized I can't accommodate these people anymore because they're holding me back, keeping me from moving forward, and that's when I prayed to God to change my life. And I had to go through this really, really painful process because, I saw myself, going nowhere. I saw, I wasn't going to be able to finish high school, dealing with this Negro and, his insane obsession with trying to make everybody just like him and just as dysfunctional as he is. Because when it comes down to a Negro or a group of Negroes, what they're going to do is they're going to try to drag anybody down who is not like them. Because this is the thing with the Negro. Anything he doesn't understand, he try to make to conform to his standard, he tries to destroy. And I ran into that, in November of '89. I was on a train, I had this jacket with leather sleeves, and then I got assaulted by a group of kids on the train. They took my jacket, and that was like the rock bottom for me. When I realized that, you can't deal with this Negro. You're never going to fit into his world. And if you try to deal with him, you cannot deal with him because he is just a cauldron of dysfunction. He cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with. And the reason why I can say that is because this is the way they were when they were teenagers. And guess what? We're 25, 26 years later. The people who I went to school with were are the fathers of these children that you see out here and these young people out here. They are the mothers of these people who are out here. They were the generation that are breeding this generation of dysfunction. And I'm going to get back to my narrative about how I changed my life because it was a really painful process because I saw that, what was painful for me was seeing the truth about this Negro, you know, and it really hurt for me to see the truth, that a lot of these people that were around me, they didn't want anything. They didn't want to do anything. They were content to remain in their own ignorance, going nowhere. And I saw the path that I was headed on because I was trying to, accommodate people because I thought, if you try to accommodate the Negro, but there is no accommodating the Negro. You have to create your own terms. And this is one of the things that I had to do. And, it just escalated and escalated. And to the point where my mother just said, you know what, you just have to go to another school. And then when I changed schools, I began to change, my entire approach to school. And what I had to do was, I had to realize that there was nothing I could do for this Negro. I had to cut him off, because this Negro, when you can't deal with him, you can't reason with him, you can't apply logic to him. He doesn't want to go ahead. He doesn't want to get ahead. All he wants to do is remain, wallowing in his victimized codependency. And he wants people to continue to enable his fantasy and his delusion that, he is some sort of cool dude. He wants that social currency. He wants to continue chasing these females. This is all he wants to do. And this is why his life hasn't changed. Because basically, he is stuck in a state of arrested development. The rest of us understand that, a boy has to grow up to manhood. And this is what the Negro doesn't understand. This is what I ran into when I changed schools. I had to realize that, that people said that, the Taft High School was a bad school. But what I found is if you apply yourself, any school can be a good school. And you have to start putting in work for yourself. And that means you're going to have to, cut people off who are toxic. You're going to have to cut people off who are dysfunctional. It means you're going to have to walk away from certain situations. It means you're going to have to walk away even from certain things you like to do. Like, I was a big time comic collector. I used to buy comics quite a bit. But when I changed schools, I didn't have access to the comics as much as I did anymore. So I had to, really pull back because I really wanted to get those grades and stuff. And within the first semester, I was on the dean's list at Taft High School because I spent, the entire semester working on a plan to rebuild my academic career. And I really got into it. And I took my education into my own hands. And I mean, it was a tough struggle. But wait a second, I just want to get this. It was a tough struggle. And thanks to, because I didn't and I had to really just, buckle down, roll up my sleeves, and do the work. There were a lot of classes that I didn't have, and then there were RCTs or regents that I didn't have. And because I took my education in my own hands, I took those tests myself. And, I looked and found the information, and I took a control of my own academic career. And, I got things together, and it was a real wake up call for me. And it took me because I graduated in '92, I started in '87. I had to spend an extra year in high school, but I had to work harder for this high school diploma than my college degree because I had to deal with this Negro and his dysfunction on a regular basis. And I can talk about change because, again, I had to change my entire life and my life approaches in order to get to that point. And that was really a hard thing. In that process, I was about 155 pounds when I was at Park West. I gained about 65, 70 pounds because of the stress and the anxiety. That's what change does to you because when you have to change, it means everything that you do, everything that you did, you couldn't do anymore. It means you have to come out of what you knew into something different. And I can tell people, from personal experience, that coming out of what I knew into something different, there were a lot of benefits to it. There was a lot of growth in it, and it was a lot of work. But I'm still, making changes to my life, and I still continue to struggle and make changes to my life because I figure if I want something in life, like this high school diploma right here, like this right here, if I want something like this, I'm going to have to go to work. If I want something like the college degree I have to go to work. I have to roll up my sleeves. But, I look at the Negro community and it doesn't want to do that type of work. They're still waiting for, the white liberal to hand them something or to just give them something just for the sake of being there. And that's not how anything in this world works. Anything you want in life, you're going to have to work and fight for. You're going to have to go out here and roll up your sleeves and really go to work. You're going to have to go to work for yourself, because this is one of the things I learned back at 16 years old in 1990, is that if I want something, I have to go out and get it, and I have to go out and fight for it. And even in some cases, I'm just going to have to fight some of these Negroes for it, because at the last job that I had, I learned the truth about, the dysfunctional nature of these codependent Negroes and their crab in a bucket mentality, how they just, they really don't want change. They want things to stay the same. They and their white liberal enablers, caretakers, really just want to keep this codependent system in place where they can remain the victim, and, the white liberal can continue exploiting them and taking advantage of them, and, continuing to make excuses for them, and nobody really moves ahead. Everything just continues on this downward spiral. Because if you really look at, your Negro community, it's not stagnating. It's continuing to fall backwards. It's like Mr. Carroll was saying in his video. You know, the Negro is not moving forward. He's moving backward, and I can see that in my very own neighborhood. I can see that in here in the South Bronx. I can see that, when I go to Harlem. If he was moving ahead, he would be owning businesses in these neighborhoods. If he was moving ahead, his own people would be working, just like these Hispanics here in the South Bronx do. They have their own businesses. They're working for themselves. They're building parts of their own community. And then these other people like Africans, Indians, and Arabs are building. But the Negro, who has been here for 400 years, and just he refuses to come out of this codependent pattern, you know, and begin the hard work of moving forward. And the reason why I talk about no hope and no change is he doesn't want to change, and he has no incentive to change. I know I said that before, but he has no incentive to change, because as long as he's got these the white liberal enabling him, and as long as he's got somebody making excuses for him, he doesn't have to. He is not. He's never been in the situation where I was, where I said to myself, I have to get out of here because these people are pretty much going to I'm going to either kill them or they're going to kill me. And, just being in this situation with these people because they don't want to change. For them, they're only in school because welfare sent them here, because their mom wants to get a welfare check. They're only here because they they have no other place to go. They don't see it as a tool towards moving themselves forward. This is the way your Negro is. Your Negro does not want to move forward. He does not want to make change, because change again means he has to step out of his comfort zone. I've stepped out of my comfort zone numerous times. I mean, I can even talk about how starting the SJS Direct imprint, I had to step out of my comfort zone, because I was working with the first ISIS book. I had to work with a print-on-demand company, and I reached a point where and I had just gotten terminated from my job, and I realized that if I want to do this All About Maryland book, which was a screenplay book and was formatted like a screenplay, I was going to have to leave the print-on-demand companies, and if I want this formatted in the way I wanted it to be formatted, in the proper screenplay format, I was going to have to learn things. I was going to have to learn, and I learned about, making my own PDF files, doing my own page layouts. I learned how to design my own front matter. I learned how to design my own back matter. I learned about ISBNs. I learned how to purchase ISBNs. Um, I had to learn how to design my own covers. I had to learn, Adobe Acrobat and Photoshop. So, in order for me to do that one book in 2009, and this is after being laid off, not laid off, but terminated from my job, I had to come out of my comfort zone, dealing with print-on-demand companies, giving them $200, to spending the money towards building the infrastructure to build that SJS Direct imprint. I had planned on doing it maybe 4 or 5 years. I was planning, it was a long-term process. I had planned on doing that While I kept the job, I thought I was going to keep the job. I was planning on doing that later on, learning the ins and outs. But because I was taken out, because I had lost a job, I had been taken out of my comfort zone. I had to learn how to do this stuff myself. I had to learn, how to do all of this myself. And it was a hard process, but I managed to keep pushing, because God told me to keep going after on the Tuesday after on the Sunday before I got fired. He told me to just keep going, and this is what I had to do. And I learned all of these processes, and I learned how to put together my own books. And then, I continued to learn. After I learned how to lay out my own paperbacks, I learned how to do ebooks. And I took the time to learn these different processes, and it was all about stepping out of my comfort zone. Like right now, I'm trying to learn different techniques in book promotion. This is one of the reasons why I'm, again, coming out of my comfort zone. I was a very, very shy and anxious person. I'm learning how to do my own videos, and really try to connect with people so they can understand that there's a person behind these books and behind this publishing imprint, and there's a guy who really cares about black people. And this is why I say again about the no hope and no change, because black people have the power to change their situation, but they don't want to do it. They have no incentive, again, no incentive to do it because they're too afraid to step out. But I'm here to tell you, as a guy who had to step out, you know, your life is going to be a lot better because you step out. You're going to grow because you step out. Because as long as you hold on to these crutches, you're not going to be able to move as fast as you would if you stood on your own 2 feet. When you stand on your own 2 feet, you can move forward. You can move faster, and you'll find yourself, excelling and achieving, and creating things to your own standard, like I do with my SJS Direct Imprint, and the books that I produce. Now, a lot of people want to complain about the covers and stuff, but it takes time to build things. Because I look at old DC comics and old Marvel comics in the Golden Age. The art on those covers was not that great. And I look at vintage paperbacks. The art on those covers was not spectacular. Nobody started out perfect. Those people started at that point because this is where they were. They thought about, they thought about the finish. They didn't think about the start. They were thinking about, you know, this is where we have to start, and this is something the Negro don't understand. He don't understand that there's a process to things. Where you start is not where you finish, and the only way for you to get to the finish line is for you to continue to move ahead. And this is something he just doesn't understand. And this is why there is no hope for him to change, because he just does not want to push. He does not want to move forward. What he wants to do is stay in that spot. And this is why, after 2 terms of Barack Obama, your black president, your black community remains at the bottom. And this is why you didn't get anything from your president for all the votes that you made to Barack Obama. 93% of people voted for Barack Obama. But, I look at the outcomes of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and it speaks volumes, about how little the Negro understands about change, how little he understands, about process. You voted, but you didn't come with a platform, and you had all the opportunity, all the time to build that platform. In 2008, you had, and 2012, you could have built yourself a nice little platform, put all the details of what you wanted, your agenda. But Negro didn't want to do that. He could have did that way back in the 1970s, when affirmative action was on, started building his political platform. But Negro don't want to do no work. He don't want to take no responsibility for his community. This is what I've seen, time and time again, dealing with him and dealing with social situations. When you go to a Negro, all he's going to do is give you excuse after excuse after excuse. And if you start doing well or trying to excel, he's going to try to throw you under the bus. There is no solidarity when it comes to Negro people. They don't work together. They don't work as a group. And they don't understand that you have to work as a group if you hope to move ahead. You have to work together if you hope to move ahead. You have to have, a consensus of goals that you want to set. Because I've had to do this, with my SJS Direct Imprint. I have to set goals every year of what I want to do, what titles I want to publish, what type themes that I want to do, what themes I want to do for my stories. When I write a story, I have to have a plan for what type of stories I want to do. When I do nonfiction, like my Simp trilogy, I have to have an outline for what I want to do. And this is all things Negro does not do. He does not plan anything. He does not set a goal. He does not set a course. He just expects other people to just do things for him, like with the case of the Barack Obama. They just expected, oh, black president, he's just supposed to do things for black people just because he's used to this liberal doing things for him. He's not expecting, that I have to come in and start doing things for myself. And this is something, your Negro doesn't understand, that you need to do for yourself, not just expect others to come in and do for you. You have to have a plan of what you want done, and, you have to get people on board with your program. And this is something, again, he just does not get. And this is why his community remains, the poorest in the world, in the industrialized world, even with $3.3 trillion in cash and credit flowing through his community. This is why his community remains the poorest in the world. Because he just does not understand, process. He just does not understand procedure. He just does not understand things that, your average Indian or African or even Hispanic person coming off the boat understands from minute one. They come in, with a plan, and then in a year they have a business, and then in 5 years they're moving out to the suburbs. They're not just sitting there waiting for change. They're like me, out here trying to change things because they understand, God does not work with you just waiting, with your faith. You have to go out here and put in some work. And this is something he just does not want to do because, again, he doesn't want accountability, doesn't want responsibility. Because this is what codependent people, they never want accountability, they never want responsibility. This is why they're codependent. Because, it's just like your alcoholic or your drug addict. They don't want to reach the point where they have to admit, I am an alcoholic, I am a drug addict. This is what people have to do all the time. They have to admit this to themselves and say that, look, I have messed up things, and this is from this point, this is what I have to do in order to move forward. I have to go and deal with these problems in order to move forward. But, this is why, again, there is no hope and no change for this Negro, even with a black president, even with, black people, all of these infrastructure that we have. He doesn't get that change starts with the person, with the individual black person, and it takes a group of people who want to change in order to make things change. And this is why, again, there is no hope and no change for this Negro. And this is how I feel about no hope and no change for the Negro. Because, you can't continue to vote straight down a Democratic ticket and expect change. You can't continue to do the exact same things and expect a different result. Definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. And when you look at the Negro, this is why there is no hope and no change for him, because he continues to vote down a Democratic ticket. He continues to play the victim, and he continues to make excuses for himself, but he continues to expect things to change. When you look at it from a logical and objective perspective, the only thing you can say about him is, this is insane. And when I look at it, because I'm gonna do another video about this Kickstarter that I'm doing, second one I'm doing, and I'm pretty much seeing, the illogic and insanity of this Negro and his whole outlook on change. I mean, he just does not understand, you know, what change entails. He continues to do things the exact same way and then expect, again, that different result. He expects people to do for him what he should be doing for himself, and expects change. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. When you look at life, you cannot expect to stay in the same situation and then expect the situation to change. You cannot stay in a comfort zone and then expect change to come. What change comes, again, I know from personal experience, it's hard, it's painful, it's difficult. You're not going to be the same person you were 4 or 5 years ago when there's change. And I know this because, again, from my high school experience, from my college experience, from periods of unemployment, and starting this SJS Direct Publishing imprint, that change is a very, very, very hard thing. And again, this change starts with you on the inside, and you have to roll up your sleeves. You have to come out of your box. You have to come out of your comfort zone. And until the Negro does this, there is no hope and no change for this Negro.